Chapter 8 of A Diamond Sky Above Titanic, a Good Omens fanfiction, written by SeaBlueEyes, read aloud by SkyAsimaru. If you enjoy this podfic, you can check out the original story, An Archive of Our Own. If you would like to hear more of my recordings or see some of my own work, you can find me through the pen and screen name of SkyAsimaru. A Diamond Sky Above Titanic, Chapter 8, The Humours of Ismay. The angel and the demon, perfectly content, sated in just about every way imaginable, were enjoying a rather good feast of delicacies on the bed, when there was a sudden knock on the door. Crowley, leaning on one elbow, looked up from the plate of tiger prawns he'd been perusing. Aziraphale, on his back with a dish on his stomach, paused in the somewhat awkward act of spearing a particularly juicy-looking piece of salted eel on his fork, and the knock from the door in the living room came again. "Who would that be?" asked the angel, stretching his neck back to scrutinize his lover from upside down. Crowley squeezed his eyes shut in dismay.
Only one.
Mr. Crowley! Mr. Crowley! Are you in there?
This pompous, intrusive, upper-class voice was accompanied by further bangs on the door. Crowley reluctantly dragged his naked body up and headed out to the living room, disappearing from Aziraphale's view for a moment before confirming with a quiet groan.
It's Ismay, all right.
He ran lithely back into the bedroom, all lithe and glorious and alarmed. Aziraphale, staring in appreciation, rolled over to observe this rather attractive sight from the correct way up. Gosh, he was so pretty when alarmed.
Hey, quick, come on, get dressed. I bet you anything he's got the key. He's got stewards and all sorts with him.
This said as the demon's suit lifted itself from where it had been cast on the floor like a shed snakeskin that morning. It shook the creases out of itself as a pair of shiny boots obediently slunk across the floor to prostrate themselves at his feet.
Bloody bastard!
He hissed, pulling on his trousers. He paused momentarily to look at Aziraphale, who was still lying there, still staring.
Get a move on, Angel. You want him to find us?
Aziraphale blinked and came out of the spell.
Oh, righto. Very well.
We might still be able to get out a back way. Come on.
Crowley smoothed his hands through his hair, which retained the sleek style as though oiled, as his shirt did up its own buttons. Aziraphale was struggling with his pants. It must be said, though, that most people struggle with their pants around Crowley. The knocking outside had ceased. There were muffled voices and an almost pantomime jangling of keys. Aziraphale was trying to put his head through an armhole.
Crowley, I'm stuck.
Miracle it on! Come on!
Crowley heard the front door opening, heard voices come into full volume, and with a quick glance, the bedroom door shut itself over.
Aziraphale!
I'm almost done. Where did I put my waistcoat?
Approaching voices, approaching footsteps.
There's no time. Just leave it. Come on, Angel, come on.
Crowley grabbed the disheveled angel by the arm, dragged him outside onto his private promenade deck, and slammed the door behind them, locking it with his eyes just as he heard the bedrooms open. Aziraphale was turning in circles on the wood floor. He had forgotten his glasses. Without them, he looked endearingly defenseless.
Now what? I thought you said there was a back entrance.
Crowley briefly gave the deck, which he had barely used, a once-over.
I said there might be another way out of here,
he corrected. He glanced over the elaborate wooden railings at the sea below, then up.
And is there?
Crowley half jogged to the far end of the deck and peered over at the sleek, smooth side of the ship, which looked stubbornly sleek and smooth and unclimbable. He looked up. Then he came back to Aziraphale.
Okay, I've got a plan,
he reported cheerfully.
It's very dangerous and very daring and exceptionally stupid, but it's the only chance we've got, so it'll have to do.
Sounds wonderful,
said Aziraphale warily. Behind them, the door handle was turned, to no effect.
Just follow my lead, okay?
Crowley took the angel by the hand and ran with him along to the end of the deck. Here he let go and put a foot on the railings, using a beam to pull the rest of his body up.
Oh, no,
said Aziraphale, backing up.
Oh, most certainly not. Do you know that I've not been discorporated for almost 400 years now? I'd like to keep it that way.
Crowley bent down in one quick, supple movement so that his face was level with and inches from the angel's.
What choice do we have?
He said, in the reasonable tone of one asking for something perfectly reasonable and not completely insane.
Look, we're only 2 stories below the main deck. All we've got to do is put 1 foot on the ledge of this porthole here.
He indicated to his left with a jerk of his head.
And 1 hand on the ledge of that porthole there.
A glance above them.
And then we just pull ourselves up and stand on the ledge of the next porthole. And
are you absolutely, completely raving mad, Crowley?
Crowley smiled, wide and gleaming, and indeed raving mad.
Nah, I'm just very, very intent on skipping dinner tonight.
He pecked the angel once on the lips, fast as a striking snake, then straightened up so that Aziraphale was left staring at trouser legs and immaculate snakeskin brogues. He heard him say,
Look, don't worry about me, Angel, yeah? I'm spry. I could do this in my sleep.
It's not you I'm worried about,
muttered Aziraphale, as the first of the demon's feet disappeared. Crowley wasn't exactly feeling as confident as he sounded. The inset ledges of the portholes were looking an awful lot narrower this close up, and further away from each other, too. He arranged his foot more securely on the railings behind him, and, gripping the bottom of the upper porthole with mere fingertips, thrust out his other foot to the ledge closest to him. He looked down over his shoulder, saw the foamy white spray of the Atlantic whizzing past at 22 knots, 15 feet below, violent, wild, hungry, and promptly looked up again. He stared straight ahead into the black bodywork of the ship, with eyes huge in their panic. Bloody hell! This was not good! He had to keep going. That lock was only going to hold for so long, and Aziraphale was depending on him. Yes, Aziraphale. He had to be brave for Aziraphale.
This is dead easy, Aziraphale,
he called over the roar of the water. His fingers were trembling from the cold of the metal, among other reasons.
Nothing to worry about at all.
He carefully lifted one foot to stand on the border that topped the circular window, a border that hadn't existed a moment ago, but he had just assumed there would be one, and so there was. Then the other, until he could straighten up enough to hold the top of the porthole above. It should be noted, readers, that no human should ever attempt this. You see, they would fall and die. Crowley definitely should have fallen and died by now. But he held on. The top of the promenade deck was only a foot or so away from his hands now. If he could just stretch up, grab the pole of the railings, and haul himself up. Aziraphale, wringing his hands and watching every move above him, could hear banging coming from the other side of the locked door as Ismay's men tried to force it open. Another thump sent a burst of anxiety hurtling through him, and he leaned far over the railings to look up.
Crowley, dear, do hurry!
A crash from behind him. That was the wood straining against the lock. Crowley's flailing hands just missed the railing.
I know, I'm almost there.
Another crash. That was the paneling buckling.
Crowley, hurry!
One final crack of shoulder against artfully embellished mahogany, and the door burst open in a scattering of splinters. Through it spilled two stewards, their White Star Line caps askew, their cheeks flushed from the exertion, and from behind them, in a suit that cost more than their wages combined, pushed their employer, J. Bruce Ismay, mustache bristling, and his expression one of haughty, self-righteous indignation. The deck was empty. Crowley couldn't breathe. He was laughing so hard. He was doing his best to help Aziraphale onto the deck, honestly, but he just couldn't stop laughing. Aziraphale, also incompetent with laughter, finally made it over the railing.
Crowley, that was...
He had to stop. He couldn't get the words out for the life of him.
Oh, that was fun!
Crowley cackled.
Oh, I wish I could have seen the look on his face.
Oh, that was possibly the most ridiculous thing I have done all millennium.
It was insane,
the demon agreed. Grinning at each other, they leaned against the railings and gratuitously caught their breaths. Around them, the first-class passengers stared in scorn at Aziraphale's untucked shirt, wrongly buttoned up, his unkempt curls, his lack of jacket. At Crowley, they just stared, which puzzled him for a moment, until he remembered. He snapped his fingers. A pair of shades materialized from out of his eyes. Aziraphale was hastily doing up his collar.
You look a sight,
Crowley pointed out, in a helpful tone of voice. Aziraphale blinked. Then he and the demon dissolved into uncontrollable laughter again. Laughed until their sides ached and their eyes ran, and old women imperiously averted their eyes from this uncouth public display of emotion. Eventually, after they had calmed down enough for coherency to resume, Crowley said thoughtfully,
I reckon we need some place decent to hide for a bit, Angel. Ismay is like one of those bloody lockjaw dogs when he gets an idea in his head. He just won't let it go. Bugger'll never stop hunting me.
Aziraphale, who was shivering in the chill of the twilight, wrapped his arms around himself. I quite agree, my dear. Then, preferably, may we hide somewhere warm? Crowley smiled then, a smile that bore all the self-assured satisfaction that only a mischievous mind hatching a wholly mischievous idea can.
You know something? I think I know the perfect place.
I'm quite certain that this is not allowed, you know, and I still fail to see why we couldn't have just gone back to my suite,
frowned Aziraphale, but not in total disapproval. It certainly was warm in here, at least. Hellishly so.
I told you,
said Crowley patiently, swinging their held hands as they strolled casually down what could have easily passed for an outer circle of hell.
They'd have figured it out eventually, where we were. We're much safer here, trust me. Not exactly first-class territory, this.
Around them, the stokers shot resentful glares at these two spotlessly clean first-classers. The whites of their eyes were most infernally juxtaposed against their soot-blackened faces, and their shining muscles rippled as they shoveled in endless streams of coal to the ruminating mouths of the boilers. Aziraphale turned to smile at the demon, a slow little smile that spread across his features, illuminating them gradually from the inside, and his companion suppressed the sibilant sounds of appreciation that rose to warm his mouth. As difficult as I find it to feel safe amidst such inherently infernal hostility, I must admit you do have a point, my boy. He squeezed Crowley's hand, and I trust you.
No one better than a guardian demon for a trip through hell, right?
Grinned Crowley, squeezing back. His sunglasses momentarily flared brilliant white as they caught the dazzling blaze of expiring coals.
And not that hell looks anything like this these days, to be honest. Less burning pits of eternal agony and more bureaucracy, if you get me.
He beamed proudly.
It's really quite nice when your suggestions are actually listened to, for once.
On they walked, dodging workers and wheelbarrows, swinging shovels, belches of ash and plumes of dust. The boiler rooms were long, narrow, and high-ceilinged, swelteringly warm and obscured by thick, dark red smoke, stretching far beyond the eye's capability to see through the haze. One might have assumed they continued on forever.
So, whatever shall we do with ourselves to while away the hours of captivity down here?
Mused Crowley, as straight-faced as he was able to, as they rounded a corner and found themselves most invitingly alone down a secluded area behind the rows of boilers.
Gosh, I'm all out of ideas, really.
He nudged his companion.
What do you reckon, Angel? Any ideas?
Aziraphale compressed his lips thoughtfully in a way that set a fascinating and most endearing little dimple in each cheek. And sexy, too. Yes, definitely, that last one. Oh, hi there, sexy little dimples. Well, we could always inspire motivation and purpose within these poor firemen, the angel supposed, shrugging. And God, somebody, Aziraphale was bloody sexy when he talked. Or perhaps sing to them? Even sexier when he shut up, though, thought Crowley, cocking his head. They do look as though they could use— Oh! In one flash, he could take it no more, and did just that to him, shoving him back against an iron-bolted wall mid-speech, and silencing that sexy voice with a long, crushing, and most definitely mind-blowing kiss. Aziraphale's mouth opened in surprise at the attack, then further in instinctive response, as every muscle in his body hardened wonderfully. Crowley's tongue was flickering so furiously within Aziraphale's mouth, fast as a hummingbird's wings. It kick-started its own pulsating rhythm within his bloodstream, reversing the flow, the natural order, all sense of up and down, of heaven and earth, heaven and hell. And Crowley grinned against that burning mouth as he felt the other being prick up with a gasp of surprised pleasure. Dear, the stokers—
So?
Hissed Crowley around an earlobe, nibbling and sucking and drawing all kinds of unimaginably arousing little discomposed noises from the angel.
Let 'em look. Bet they could use the entertainment.
He coiled a leg around Aziraphale's own, pressing their bodies together, pressing their fires together.
Just shut up and let me seduce you, Angel.
Aziraphale did, and then it was Crowley's turn to gasp in surprise as the angel took control and lunged, forwards and inwards, against and around. He raked his hands through the demon's coal-dusted hair, thrusting back against him in retaliation of the kiss, unleashing his own equally fiery and equally damnable passion on the momentarily unsuspecting enemy. Their lips collided in a flurry of crushing, frenzied strikes, clashing, then parting, dragging unnecessary air in at each heavy half-second apart as their hands teased and traversed and slid beneath buckles into darkened areas of heat and intoxication. Vented steam billowed all around them as they worked, colors of old wine and new suns silhouetting them against the spectrum of oranges. And then, quite suddenly, Crowley was alone. Aziraphale had vanished, and Crowley was arched and panting and, most annoyingly, deflating against a bare wall. He drew back in surprise, stared all around him in confusion.
Aziraphale?
He called, spinning on his heels. His initial thoughts of some kind of joke were rapidly decaying to sour-tasting anxiety on finding the passage behind him also Aziraphale-less. What in the hell was going on?
Aziraphale?
He tried again, a little more alarmed this time. His words barely carried 5 feet through the smoke. Something was wrong. Something was different about the room now. Crowley, cautiously treading back towards the boilers, suddenly realized nobody was looking at him or paying the slightest bit of attention to him. Totally sober and serious now, the demon waved a hand in front of the nearest stoker's face, who was grunting rhythmically to himself as he shoveled.
Hello,
said Crowley.
Hello, excuse me.
No response. Okay, not good. He spun around and, much to his relief, saw someone who was staring straight at him.
Hi,
said the demon to the stoker, approaching him.
You wouldn't happen to have seen my friend, would you? He was right with me, not a moment. Excuse me, sir?
The man was not looking at Crowley at all. He was staring at the pocket of air that Crowley was currently occupying. He was staring right through Crowley, and he appeared to be listening hard to something. There was a look of intense concentration, so far as the demon could tell through the dirt, on his scowling face, as though someone was whispering in his ear. Then, suddenly, his face became blank and apathetic. He shrugged his big shoulders, apparently in response to something Crowley most definitely had not been the one to say.
"All right,"
shrugged the man, completely indifferent, staring right through Crowley. Then he lifted one foot and stepped straight into his boiler. Crowley spluttered and gasped and made the sort of incoherent noise that happens when you try to say, "What?" and "No!" and "Shit!" all at once. He had taken one involuntary step forward before he even realized what he was doing. But no sooner had he realized this when he involuntarily stopped dead again. Something was coming out of the boiler, where the man had just stepped in and purged himself. Someone was climbing out of the fire. It was a man, but a completely different man. A slender and elegant figure, apparently untouched by the flames, unaffected by the incredible heat. A man who wore what appeared to be a fashionably cut, perfectly tailored pinstripe suit. A man who seemed oblivious to its singeing sleeves, to the white-hot coals stuck to the soles of his otherwise immaculate shoes, to the insane temperatures that should have melted that perfect, pretty, well-moisturized face right off. It was a man Crowley had hoped never to see again. Someone he had completely forgotten he was told he would be seeing again on this very voyage. He was also not a man. He was a demon. Asmodeous straightened his tie and raised his cuffs to his lips to gently blow out the flames. Then he smiled, slowly and languidly and lasciviously, tilted his head to admire the other demon with lust-filled, heavy-lidded eyes. "Hello, Crowley." To be continued in Chapter 9.
Thank you for reading. Please drop by the archive and let the author know what you thought of their work.